Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Bible study on a very hot day. I'll tell you what, I came tonight and I took some water down the basement. I stepped out of the car and I thought I walked into an oven. That was as hot as I felt. The sun was shining and it was beating down. And it was like, this is crazy. You know, I've been to Phoenix, Arizona. I've been to Florida. I've been to South Dakota in the middle of August. And that felt as hot as any time I've ever felt. I mean, that was great. Hopefully we're going to get a little relief, but I thank God that we need to be in His will in all that He does. We don't understand sometimes why things happen, but He controls it all. Weather, stars, the earth, tides, it's all in His hands. So we just gotta thank Him for every day that we have. I think about Mary, who went to bed the night before last and didn't wake up. She just did not wake up. That can happen to any of us. That can happen to any one of us. So we gotta appreciate each day. It may be hot, it may be cold, it may be sunny, it may be rainy. I tell people. Every day may not be great, but every day is a blessing. There are good days, there are bad days, but every day that we wake up is a blessing. I know there are days I've gone through, it's like I struggle with complaining, this is the worst day I've ever spent in my life. And guess what? The day comes along, it's even worse. So we got to be careful what we complain about. I'm sure there's a lot of people who wish you could have that one more day. And the fact that you can get up and you're not in pain, you're not sick, that your bills are paid, and you got food on the table, you go lay down there, look over your head. What do you got to complain about? What do you got to complain about? You really don't. And we have so many conveniences now today. I mean, think about that. We can turn the spigot on and get water. We get hot water. We get cold water. We got a refrigerator. You put all kinds of food in it. You get peppers, cold food. It wasn't too long ago that people, they wanted hot water, they had to take the pot out and put it on the fireplace or on the outside and boil it, pour it in there. If they had to go to the bathroom, they went out to that house that was out there. And the fact that we are so blessed today, and I know we grumble, we complain, the troubles come up. The problem is our troubles always seem so big. It's my trouble. It's irritating me and making me mad, and I'm frustrated about it. But when I look at my neighbor and think, compared to what they're going through, my trouble seems pretty small. So, all of you remember, there's probably people out there that have worse troubles, and there's probably people out there that have less troubles. But God is good every single day. We're in Daniel. I think we stopped in 38, 36. Okay, well, we're going to go back a little bit. King Nebuchadnezzar is a funny guy to me. He really is. Sometimes he's the smartest king I've ever seen, and other things he's never for He makes these proclamations and he doesn't think about the consequences of them and doesn't realize how much trouble he gets himself into. But he has this dream, and it troubled him because he could not understand. Have you ever had dreams like that? Everybody's had. I used to have weird dreams when I was younger. You know what I dream about? Working. I'm working somewhere. I'm doing something somewhere. Sometimes I'm back at the old factory. Sometimes I'm somewhere I've never been before, but I'm working. They want me. It's like, man, this is crazy. I wake up tired. What do you do? I worked all night. Where do you work? I don't know. Strange place. But God does give us dreams, and I think sometimes God will speak to you through those dreams. My problem is a lot of times I don't always remember my dreams. When I wake up right away for a few minutes, okay, and then when I get wide awake, I forget it. But Nebuchadnezzar had a dream, and it troubled him, and he didn't understand it. So he called his wise men, his seers, prophets, and he asked them to interpret the dream. And I thought Nebuchadnezzar was very wise because he didn't tell him what the dream was. He didn't tell him what the dream was. He said to them, you tell me what the dream was and what it means. Because I'm thinking, it could have been really easy. And I'm thinking, well, should we ask you? Should we say, what was the dream and we'll interpret it for you? And I think the first thing he'd say is, if you don't know what my dream is, how are you going to interpret it? If you're not wise enough to know what I dream, you're not going to be wise enough to interpret it. So, he simply said, I need you to interpret it. And of course, he said, if you can't, you're going to be chopped up pieces. So that puts a little pressure on these people, right? Wait a minute, if we can't interpret it, we're going to die. Maybe we don't want to try to interpret it. Maybe we just want to wait. But he says, you can't do it. I'm going to kill you. And they refused, so he got mad. He wasn't happy because they weren't even going to try. And so he set on a decree to kill them all. But David heard about it. By that time, David was part of the crew, him and his buddies. And he went to the king. He says, give me a minute here. I will tell you. So I want to go back to 29. It says, as for thee, O king, thy thoughts came into thy mind upon thy bed to read these things. What should come to pass hereafter? He's already saying, the dream that you had is to show you what was coming in the future. Now here's the crazy thing, and I think this just shows you that we don't know the mind of God. Nebuchadnezzar worshipped idols. Nebuchadnezzar worshipped all kinds of different things, images and idols and stuff, and yet God showed him favor. And my first thought is, why God are you showing this man favor? He's not a very, very good person, it seems like. But God had a plan. And God will use who he will use. And that's why sometimes we look and say, well, why is that person, being favored by God? He hasn't done anything. We don't know God's mind. We don't know what his ideas, what his thoughts were. He says, okay, thy thoughts came unto thy mind upon my bed, what should come to pass in the future? And he that reveals secrets made it known to thee what shall come to pass. He says, no, God who reveals what's going to come, he's chosen you. He's chosen you to show you what's going to come in the future. How many here would love to know what the future is?
I've experts like that.
The problem with that is there's good side to that and bad side to that. Because the future is going to hold good things and hold bad things. And knowing what's coming up that's good, that's great, what's the next lottery number? I'll use those. But then, next thing you hear about James and his wife and those things. And so it's kind of a mixed blessing when that happens. But as for me, this secret is not revealed to me for any wisdom that I have more than any living. So he says, I'm not boasting here. I'm not bragging here. This dream and what it means is revealed to me not because I'm special. I'm just he's this 16, 17-year-old boy who's been in been trained, and he says, I'm nothing special. He says that I have more than any living, but for their sakes, I like that. I thought that was interesting. For the living's sake, that shall make known the interpretation of the king, and thou might know the thoughts of thy heart. He says, for the people's sake, so that they will know what the future is going to bring, I'm going to reveal this to you. Thou, O king, sawest, and behold, a great image. This great image, whose brightness was excellent, stood before thee, and the form there was terrible or awesome. So he saw this large image. We don't know exactly what it looked like, but evidently it had a head, it had arms, it had a torso, it had legs, it had feet. But obviously it scared the king. It was so large, so huge, it scared the king. This image's head was of fine gold, his breast and his arms of silver, his belly and his thighs of brass, his legs of iron, his feet part iron and part clay. So this image he saw was made up of different types of material. It starts out with the head, which was gold, which even back in those days that was very valuable. then silver, and then brass, and then iron, and these were all things that were important in those days. Thou sawest this till a stone was cut out without hands, which smote the image upon his feet that were of iron and clay, and brake it into pieces. Thou sawest that a stone was cut out without hands. A stone, what do you think the stone was? Or what was the stone? You saw a stone that came and destroyed the image.
Stone, Jesus.
Jesus. That's what they believed. Then was the iron, the clay, the brass, the silver, and the gold broken into pieces together. It became like the chaff in the summer threshing floor. And the wind carried them away, and no place was found for them. And the stone that smote the image became a great mountain and filled the whole earth.
Mm-hmm.
So this was the dream that Nebuchadnezzar had, and Daniel explained to him exactly what he saw. So that impressed the king right there. You're right. I saw all those things that you said. I saw in this dream. So right away he must have thought this man knows what he's talking about. Now he goes to interpret it. What I like about what is really crazy about all this is Daniel interprets the dream, and then we have to interpret Daniel's interpretation.
Yeah.
Because it's hard to understand what his interpretation is. And even in these books here, this is the dream, and we will tell the interpretation thereof before the king. When he says we, who's he including?
His friend.
3 brothers, his brother. Thou, O king, art a king of kings, for the God of heaven hath given thee a kingdom, power, and strength and glory. All authority comes from God. All authority on this earth. We think it's from people saying, we vote him in, we vote him out. All authority comes from God. And he chose Nebuchadnezzar to have this great authority, this great nation, in spite of the fact that he was a heathen. That's the thing that kind of messes up my mind when I think about it. It's like, you made Nebuchadnezzar king over this greatest kingdom that at that time had been on earth, and yet he was a heathen. He believed in false gods and worshiped false images. And in my mind, it's like, why would you do that? That doesn't make sense to me. But you know what? His thoughts are not my thoughts, his ways are not my ways. As far as the heavens are from the earth. And so when I try to sit down there and reason with myself, why would God do this? The Holy Spirit says, because he can. He chose Nebuchadnezzar to be this great king. It gave him the power and authority to be that. And wheresoever the children, yes.
But really don't we know in studying why he did that?
Yeah, when we study the book, he reveals some of the things he used Nebuchadnezzar for.
But don't we know why he put an evil king over his people?
Over his people?
Yes.
Well, because they sinned.
Because they chose evil over righteousness. So he said, okay, that's what you want, here you go. They chose pagan God, so he said, I'll give you a pagan king. And so they had to live under that rule until they decided, this is not good. And they started calling out to God.
You wonder why they were that way. I think about how many times they turned away from God. How many times God brought them back. How many times God forgave them and put them back in power and gave them the land back. And it wasn't too much longer after that. They turned away again.
I will give you my answer, and I think you will probably agree with it. You may not. It's because they're just like us. God gives us free will, and we get that God gave us free will, and we go off and use it the way we want instead of the way God wants, and we use it the wrong way, and then they wound up just like we are today, and that's what happens.
Yeah, God has given us. I think what's important to realize is individual choice.
Yes.
Every one of us has the right and the power to choose what we want to choose.
Yes.
The problem with it is All choices have consequences.
All choices.
And you make a good choice, you're gonna have a good consequence. You make a bad choice, you're gonna have a bad consequence. Part of our problem with people is we look at another person's choice and say, well, that's a pretty good choice. I'm gonna do that too. And that's my choice. I'm choosing to choose with somebody else, but you really shouldn't do that. You need to choose for yourself. And but it's not any different today. I mean, you look around, when Jesus left this earth and sent his disciples out, the plan was for the church.
Yes.
The church. And he wasn't planning on all these different churches. The plan wasn't to have all these different denominations, all these different religions. That was not the plan. The plan was there was going to be the church, and we all be part of it. Now, I know we can't all get in one building, and we do that, but we still could come and worship the same, worship God, and follow his word. But unfortunately, people had choice, and somebody sat down and said, well, I think this is how I interpret the scriptures, and this is what it says we need to do, and therefore we need to follow that. And other people say, no, that kind of makes sense, I'm going to go ahead and follow that. And then we get this division, and people follow the wrong people, and we're in the mess we're in today. But in the end, God has a plan.
Mm-hmm.
God has a plan, and it's all written down here in this book. And if we would just study it and recognize it, that the things that are happening, I was really hoping I wasn't going to be around to see all this. But I've been long enough that it's like I'm starting to see what's happening in this world, and it's not going to get better, people. I'm going to tell you right now, it's not going to get better. As much as I want it to be better, I do see places where people are coming to Christ. I see places where people get baptized. But I see more places where people turn away. And the problem I think we have in the world today is we celebrate that which is evil. We're starting to celebrate that which is wrong. You don't see the media coverage of these great rallies where people come together to worship Jesus and praise Jesus. You don't see that. What you see is all that other stuff that causes people to be confused and drawn away from the church. So, it's like I said, I really was hoping that I wasn't going to be around to see all that, but it's going to get worse. That's the problem. And wheresoever the children of men dwell, the beasts of the field and fowls of heaven have given unto thine hand, and have made thee ruler over them all. Thou art this head of gold. So he says to him that head of gold on that image, that's you. That's you. Because you're the best. You've got control over, you've got the authority. God has given you all the things that you need. And after these shall rise another kingdom, inferior to me, and another third kingdom of brass, which shall bear rule over all the earth. And the fourth kingdom shall be strong as iron, for as much as iron breaketh in pieces, and subdueth all things. And as iron breaketh all these, shall it break in pieces and bruise. So he's talking about the kingdoms that are coming on this earth. I personally believe that when we get down to the feet of the statue, we've got 10 little toes and the 10 little kingdoms. I believe those are the 10 kingdoms that the Antichrist creates during the tribulation. I believe those are the kingdoms that are going to be great for a very short time, 7 years, and it will be destroyed. So I think what God is revealing in everything is from his time, which was the head, down through the end, which was the feet and the toes of his image. Now, the problem is that we have to interpret that, and somebody has to interpret, well, what kingdoms is he talking about? And there's different opinions on the kingdoms that they're talking about here. But what God is trying to reveal to Nebuchadnezzar is there will be other kingdoms that follow him until we get to the very end. He's showing the end. And whereas thou sawest the feet and toes, part of the potter's clay and part of iron, the kingdom shall be divided, but there shall be in it of the strength of iron, as for as much as thou sawest the iron mixed with the mighty clay. Again, when the Antichrist sets up these 10 kingdoms, they're gonna be the 10 kings that control the earth. They're gonna have the power to control the earth. They're gonna look great for a while. They're gonna look wonderful for a while. And can you imagine the kings that are appointed to the one of those kingdoms? I mean, they're gonna be excited. They're gonna be excited. These are gonna know that they're worshiping the devil. And as the toes of the feet were part of iron and part of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly broken. And whereas thou sawest iron mixed with miry clay, they shall mingle themselves with seeds of men, but they shall not cleave one to another, even as iron is not mixed with clay. You know, again, you can't mix the good with bad. You can't mix evil and good. You can't. It will not last. You know, it may seem good for a while, it may seem exciting for a while, but it won't last. You cannot serve God and mammon. That's what the Bible says, right? You cannot serve God and serve this world. You've got to be in this world, you're placed in this world. This world is great for you, but if you're going to serve God, you have to serve God. You know, and I think that's so important. I think that's where a lot of churches have gone astray. In this modern world, a lot of preachers and a lot of Christians that, you know, God has to be first. God has to be first in your life. And that, and let's face it, for human beings, that's not always easy for us to do, is it? It's like Pastor says, we got to give up self. We got to give up self. And we don't like that. You know, I like who I am. I think I'm important. You know, I think I'm good. I think I'm all this. But, you know, you've got to give that up and focus on the will of God, what He wants for you in your life. And I know that a lot of people say, but I don't know what I need to do. I mean, I'm not a great teacher, I'm not a great preacher, I'm not a great evangelist, I'm not a great this, I'm not a great that. You know what? God has a plan for each and every one of us.
Amen.
Each and every one of us. We're not all evangelists, we're not all teachers, we're not all preachers, we're not all pastors, we're not all that. But we have a purpose. And that is to serve the kingdom. And you can serve the kingdom a lot of different ways than just up here or up here. You know, every day you have the opportunity to help someone. Every day you have the opportunity to spread the love of Jesus Christ. That's where I think we're missing. A lot of Christians are missing that. That, you know, what Jesus wants us to do is spread His love to this world. That's not to love sin. That's not to go out and say, well, we can forgive sin because we love you. No, that's not for that. But I had some, I'm going to be honest with you, sometimes I get a little irritated with some of these people who go out in the streets and start arguing with people over Christianity. You know, they have a big crowd and they start arguing about, you know, what's this and what's that. And it's like, I don't believe Jesus wants us to do that. He wants us to stand up for the kingdom. He wants us to stand up for the life. But He wants us to show, not, you know, the words are fine, and the things that we speak, but He wants us to show the world who He is. And we have, each one of us have that responsibility, that purpose in this life, every single day to show someone the love of Jesus Christ. You have an opportunity every day to help someone. I'm going to tell you right now. You say, no, I don't. Yes, you do. Yes, you do. You know, and I'm going to tell you right now, it may be as simple as seeing someone in the store looking so sad and so upset and go up to them and smile and say, I hope you have a good day. I hope you have a good day. Or, you know, the lady can't reach the can on the stuff on the shelf. There's a can there. You know, you're up at the checkout, you got one can, and somebody behind you, the whole grocery cart full. You know, I'll let it go. Because I, you know, first, I'm retired, so I don't have to worry about going anywhere. But every day we have that opportunity to share the love of Jesus Christ. You know, and you don't have to be a preacher, you don't have to be a teacher, you don't have to be an evangelist. You just got to be a Christian, a follower of Christ. That's what you got to do. And that's what God has called us, especially today in this world, to be that. And I think that's where the church is failing more than anything else. I'm sorry, but, you know, I don't like talking against it, but these churches that think building big cathedrals and putting in gymnasiums and having band concerts and having all this stuff is what Jesus wants. I'm sorry. I don't think so. You know, strobe lights up here, you know, well, that's the modern age, you know, we want strobe lights, you know, we want all, you know, that's not what, you know, you're drawing people into a building. Are you drawing them to Christ? And I have no problem if they're drawing them in and teaching them and showing them that. But a lot of times they're not because they're so caught up in trying to build the ministry. Yep. I hear pastors talking about that. Build the ministry. It's like, no, you're called to build the kingdom. You're not called to build the ministry. You're called to build the kingdom. You know, you have every place built and nobody's saved. You have not built the kingdom. You got to build a big ministry. You got a great church. You know, you got a lot of people, you know, doing great things. But you never help build the kingdom. And that's what he wants from us. And it's pretty much that simple. You know, sometimes we make it so complicated, you get so afraid that, you know, I can't do that. You know, I don't know all these Bible verses, and I can't do what other people do. Stop worrying about that. Stop worrying about that. Let God put on your heart what you need to do. But you have to have your mindset of Jesus. You got to have your mindset of Jesus.
When I go out, that's how my pop and one around the community, we go to the haunted house sometimes, get like halfway houses and stuff around town. First thing I do is say, free water, free pop, and stuff like that. You won't know where you get in, but it's important to get, you know, saved for your life. It's not going to change, you know. You need to get born again, you know. And a lot of them don't even know what it is.
Right.
A lot of them don't, you know. And when they get in prison, some of them, I got some of them homeless or stuff like that, you know. So I get to talk to them today, you know. More people come in there, right? And I'm not trying to find the church here. I'm trying to find Jesus first. And then, once I get done passing the way, pop out there. I said, you want to go to church? And if you did go to church somewhere else, you know, if it's a good Bible reading church, right? Go back, talk to the pastor, see if you get involved with it. But if not, you know, if you don't have one, you don't know how much.
And you, Tony, I believe that what you're doing is very good. I mean, I think that's what God has put on you to do. I mean, I really believe, because you do it with a passion. I think that's important. But we all have an opportunity every day to, you know, we don't necessarily have to go out and invite people to church, but we have to show people Jesus. And I think that's what's important. I've been on the streets, and I've been out tracks, and I've talked to people, and you know, I mean, 1 out of 100 might stand there and do that. But if you go into the store and you start, especially, you know, I go to drug market all the time. People know me because I talk to them, cash register, and you know, people don't have to ask if I'm a Christian. They know because I show love to people. You know, and that's what we need to do is we need to go out and show the world what a true Christian is. Unfortunately, they see all these other crazy people who call themselves Christians do crazy things, and that's Satan confusing you. That's how Satan works. He wants you to be deceived. Deception is Satan's greatest tool. He wants to deceive as many people as he can. But again, our job is to be a Christian every single day. Putting self aside. Now, I'm going to be honest with you, I don't always do that. I mean, sometimes I'm selfish, I'll be honest with you. Sometimes I'm selfish. And I feel ashamed and I ask for forgiveness, but, you know, don't stop just because of that. Keep going. Whereas thou sawest iron mixed with miry clay, they shall mingle themselves with seed of men, but they shall not cleave one to another, even as iron is not mixed with clay. And in the days of these kings shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left to other people, but it shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. Again, he's talking about end times. He's talking about the end of the world. Because God is going to set up his kingdom. Jesus is going to set up his kingdom someday. And all the kingdoms of this world, all the nations that think they're so great, are not going to be so great. I love the fact that people say the United States of America is the greatest nation on earth. People look, the United States is not mentioned once in the Bible. You know, it talks about Israel, it talks about Syria and Iran and Iraq, those areas. We're not mentioned. We're not mentioned. Because in the end, it's not going to be about us. It's not going to be about us. It's going to be about the kingdom of God, and he's going to establish it in a place that, you know, if we want to go visit, we got to go a long ways. And in the days of these kings shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left to other people, but it shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. For as much as thou sawest, the stone was cut out of the mountain without hands, and that it break in pieces the iron, the brass, the clay, the silver, and the gold. The great God hath made known to the king what shall come to pass hereafter, and the dream is certain, and the interpretation thereof is sure. Again, the stone is who? Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ. He is going to, in the end, all the kingdoms of the earth are going to be destroyed. In the end, all the nations of the earth are going to pass. I tell you what, I have a really hard time with these nations fighting over boundaries. You know, well, you know, it's this imaginary line that we draw around this area, and every inside of it is ours, and on the outside of the world. None of it's ours. None of it's ours. How many nations have fallen in the history of man? Nations have come, nations have gone, kingdoms have come, kingdoms have gone. Some of the greatest kings that we write about, long dead, long gone. You know, and we set up ourselves for failure when we think that we're the greatest nation on earth. We are not the greatest nation on earth. The greatest nation on earth will not come until after the tribulation. And then even greater is the one after the new heaven and the new earth. But I think it's interesting that Daniel interprets the king's dream, but then now we have to sit here and try to interpret what all these things mean. And that's where we get in trouble. You know, the different kingdoms, I was going to go through that, but it's like, it doesn't make any difference. I'll read what it says here. It says, and again, I've read different things that say different things. You know, we believe it's this kingdom, we believe it's that kingdom. It says in here that the history makes it clear that the second world kingdom was the Silver Empire led by the Medes and the Persians. The reason it was the Medes and Persians is because it was silver was on two arms, Medes and Persians. That's the two kingdoms. And the third world kingdom was the brass empire led by the nation of Greece under Alexander the Great. And the second Gentile world government had two arms and was divided into two divisions, the Medes and the Persians. The fourth Gentile world government had two legs of iron and was divided into two main divisions, Eastern Roman Empire and Western Roman Empire. You know what? I don't care. I really don't care.
It's sad that they were trying to figure out who they were rather than figuring out what the outcome was.
Right. Exactly.
It didn't matter who they were. The whole story behind the thing was Jesus was going to come and knock everyone.
And right. And that's what is sad that they looked at it and said, okay, we're going to have all these great kingdoms, but they don't last. They don't last. And Jesus is going to come, and Jesus is going to be ruler of this world. For 1,000 years, he's going to rule
On this planet.
on this planet, on this earth,
Yes.
over there in Israel. No. So, they can fight over that land all they want. They can do all kinds of terrible things to each other. They can kill each other. They hurt each other. They can do all that stuff, and they can claim that it's their land. But in the end, it's not. It's not.
And the sad part, I'll throw this out here right now. The sad part is they still are not sure of who is going to occupy that land.
Right.
They're still not sure. I'll just say we, when I say we, I'm talking about humankind.
Right.
Still not sure who's gonna occupy that. We all think we got it all figured out, just like we all think we got it all figured out who these people are that make up this statue of this large.
Right. And all of you are just so confused. Right. I read somewhere, I can't remember what it was, but he said, you know, it's really sad that when Abraham and Lot divided up the territory, if Abraham had gone where Lot is, Israel had all the oil fields. You know, that's because Lot ended up going where Saudi Arabia is. But again, you know, the thing is that, and I think what he was trying to show Nebuchadnezzar, that all these great kingdoms are temporary. They're not permanent. You know, they're not permanent. I don't care how great the kingdom of Babylon was. I don't care how far it stretched. It didn't last. Where is it today? The city of Babylon is deserted. There is nobody in the city of Babylon today. Saddam Hussein tried to rebuild it, but that didn't work out well for him either. And it's not going to be rebuilt until when? Tribulation, yeah. When the Antichrist comes.
And it's still not.
And it's not going to last very long. It's not going to last very long. But the word of God is faithful and true. And again, he tried to show that Nebuchadnezzar what was going to happen, and I'm not sure Nebuchadnezzar really understood it. I think he was more, I'll tell you what I think impressed Nebuchadnezzar more than anything else, is Daniel told him what he read. You know, because he didn't tell anybody what he saw. But here Daniel, I think the interpretation was, well, as long as I'm the head, you know, I'm the greatest king, I don't care about the rest of that.
I really think he didn't remember what he saw, and Daniel brought all that. He just did not, it was there, but he couldn't call it out. Daniel brought it back, and he saw it, but he didn't know until Daniel told him what each part was. Right? And that's what brought him to it.
Yeah. That's where we're going right now. Then the king Nebuchadnezzar fell upon his face and worshipped Daniel, and commanded that they should offer an oblation and sweet odor to him. He fell down to the 16, 17-year-old boy and worshipped him. Worshipped him, worshipped this 16, 17-year-old boy, just because he was able to tell him about his dream. We have got to be real careful. We've got to be real careful today who we look to. There are so many, I'm going to tell you right now, there's false prophets, false teachers, false preachers in this world today who are trying to confuse the masses, trying to confuse the church. We have got to be very careful that we don't start worshiping a human being. Yes. And, you know, I forget where it was, but I can't remember. But the pastor was sitting up here in a chair, and people were coming by, bending their knee down, kissing his ring. And they just had one of the people coming around, the people in the congregation, that every one of them come up, bow before him and kiss his ring. The Pope, they do that to the Pope. I'm sorry, but that is not right. You know, we should never worship a man, or a woman, or a child,
On their ring.
or their ring. That's right. But Nebuchadnezzar, you know, he was used to worshiping idols, so I guess maybe this was probably pretty easy for him. But he was so impressed. And the king answered unto Daniel and said, "Of a truth it is that your God is a God of gods." Here's what kind of doesn't impress me is that he recognized that it wasn't Daniel that knew the truth. It was his God that showed him what the dream was. Through Daniel. I think that, to me, that's very impressive. That Nebuchadnezzar was able to recognize that. That it wasn't this young boy who was able to do it, but it was the God that he worshiped.
But you notice how Daniel started his interpretation out.
Exactly.
He put God first.
Yeah. And the king answered unto Daniel and said, "Of a truth it is that your God is God of gods and a Lord of kings, and revealer of secrets. See now, who has revealed this secret. Then the king made Daniel a great man, and gave him many great gifts, and made him ruler over the whole province of Babylon, and the chief of the governors over all the wise men of Babylon. You know what? Sometimes that gets people in trouble, doesn't it?
Yeah.
When people start patting you on the back and telling you how good you are, how good you are, you know, you've got all these awards and all these medals and all this stuff. You know, you gotta be real careful. You gotta be real careful when people start praising you. And we are called to be humble. We are called to be humble. You know, I don't like it when people talk about me as being more than just an ordinary man. Well, you're a great fish, you're a great guy. No, I'm not. Well, you're a good man. No, I'm a man who's trying to be good, but I'm not a good man. You know, we gotta have humility, and I can imagine what happened. This 16, 17-year-old boy suddenly has all this power. I'm impressed that Daniel stayed level-headed as he did, because for anybody else, that would have gone to your head, right? Now I'm in charge. I'm large and I'm in charge.
Yeah, just a few minutes ago, he was a slave.
Yeah. Well, actually, it wasn't too long before that they're trying to find him and kill him. They're going to chop him up for no reason other than they couldn't interpret the dream. Then Daniel requested the king, and he said, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego over the affairs of the province of Babylon. But Daniel said in the gate of the king. So, you know, Daniel wasn't going to forget his buddies. Daniel wasn't going to forget his friends. He made sure that they had places of power and rule in the kingdom. Nebuchadnezzar, this is chapter 3. Nebuchadnezzar the king made an image of gold. Now, here we go. Good old Nebuchadnezzar, you know, your God, Daniel is the greatest God there is, you know, and all that. And now all of a sudden, you know what? That image, that gold, that, you know, that head on that image was made of gold, that was supposed to be me. You know what? Maybe I'll just make myself an image. So Nebuchadnezzar the king made an image of gold whose height was 80 cubits and the breadth therefore 60. But it was big. It was tall and wide. He set it up in the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. Then Nebuchadnezzar the king sent to gather together the princes, the governors, the captains, the judges, the treasurers, the counselors, the sheriffs, and all the rulers of the provinces to come to the dedication of the image which Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. And then the princes, the governors, the captains, the judges, the treasurers, the counselors, the sheriffs, and all the rulers of the province were gathered together unto the dedication of the image that Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. And they stood before the image that Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Then a herald cried aloud, to you it is commanded, O people, nations, and languages, that at what time ye hear the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, dulcimer, and all kinds of music, ye fall down and worship the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar the king has set up.
There you go.
Why would any human being think that a statue made out of gold, silver, rubber, stone, whatever, could do anything for you? What can an image of an idol do for you? There's nothing.
Same thing the children of Israel did in the desert. They thought that golden calf would be something.
No, they didn't think it would. They said it did.
Yeah.
See, this is the thing I like about this, is his dream and his interpretation told him this was going to happen.
Right.
It was like, this is what you're going to do. And I guess he didn't remember.
But you see, the problem is today we don't always set up idols. We do worship things that aren't God.
Yes, which then it becomes the idol.
It becomes an idol. What's most important in your life? I walk every day, and there's a man down the street who bought a new truck, and I think he washes it every day. I really, every time I go by, there's suds, and he's out there washing his truck. And I'm thinking, you know what? Why are you doing that in this hot sun? Why are you out there washing your truck? My neighbor, when we first moved in, every Sunday morning, like clockwork, when we back out of the driveway to go to church, he was washing his truck. To me, that's an idol. To me, that because you spend all that time and energy trying to take care of something that
In 5 years, it's going to be less.
is gonna be gone. You have something?
In Psalm 119:11, it says, "Thy word have I hidden in thy heart, that I might not sin against you."
Yeah.
You know, this is what Daniel was going, he hiding God in his heart, and he shall. And all that, and then you see what happened.
But again, here the king, this great king that God gave authority to, his authority came from God. This great king decided to create an idol and have the nation, all the rulers, all the leaders, bow down and worship this image that he did. And again, I guess part of my problem is I hear people say, well, you worship a God you don't see. You don't see God? No. Then why do you worship him? Because I've seen what he can do. I've seen what God can do. An idol ain't going to do nothing. You know, in fact, the only thing this one can do is fall on you good. You know, it's so huge. You know, we should not worship the things of this world. And we say we don't, but they're more important than anything else. Would worship your truck on Sunday morning is more important than going to church? That's not it. When you know, you spend, Saturday or Sunday morning mowing the lawn, that's not it. Oh, I want my lawn to be the prettiest in the neighborhood. That's not it. I go by Planet Fitness every Sunday morning, and there's cars everywhere. Yeah. Everywhere. And I think, what are you people doing? You're trying to make your body healthy, but you don't care about your soul. Well, I want to live as long as I can. Okay, you might get it to 100, but guess what? You're going to make it to 100, you're going to die.
All of them are not trying to make their body healthy, they're trying to make them look good, because they come out like a cigarette, like
Some of them do that. Yeah, some of them do that. But those are things. To me, an idol is anything you put before God. Anything that you have that you put before God is more important to you than God, especially the physical things. More important to you than God. That's an idol. Well, I don't worship it. Well, really? Why? And why is it so much important? I go through my neighborhood and everybody has those vector signs out. Be protected by this, be protected by that. Someday, somebody's gonna come in here and throw all that stuff out. My neighbor across the street, when they took him down to Columbus nursing home, they came in, they picked over what they wanted, and they left everything else there, and they sold it. I mean, when these people bought the house, it was almost furnished. Because nobody wanted a couch, nobody wanted a chair, nobody wanted a dining table. They just left it. And yet, this man, all that stuff was important to him at one time. Because it's mine. It's mine. When you get that mindset that I really don't own anything, I think that's what's important as a Christian. I really don't own anything. I'm borrowing everything I have. I'm borrowing everything I have. I know that when I bought our house, the neighbor came over and says, do you know where the property line is? I said, no, I do not know it. And, well, I was wondering, it's like, I told him, I said, well, it doesn't matter to me, because I'm just borrowing this. This is not, I'm not going to be here. I mean, somebody owned it before me, somebody's going to own it after me. Both neighbors came out and tried to show me where the property line was. It's like, guys, I don't care. Because this is just temporary. Am I happy with my home and my yard and all that stuff? Yes, I thank God every day for what He's provided for me. But I also know that it's not that important. And I also know it's not that important. There's people that have much bigger houses, much nicer houses. There's also people who live on the streets. So I'm just thankful that I've got what I've got. And we've got to be careful about making idols out of things that we think are important. Then the herald cried aloud to you as commanded, O people, nations, and languages, that at what time you hear the music, you shall fall down and worship the golden image. And whoso falleth not down and worship shall be the same hour be cast in the midst of a burning fiery furnace. Wow. Debbie, you messed up. But you know what? He didn't know. Therefore, at that time, when all the people heard the sound of the cornet, the flute, the harp, the sackbut, the psaltery, and all kinds of music, all the people of the nations and the languages fell down and worshipped the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. So they did what the king told them to do.
Yes.
Yeah, so they thought. Wherefore, at that time, certain Chaldeans came here and accused the Jews. So why? The Jews were taught not to worship idols. I don't know if they learned their lesson or not in the desert, and half of them were destroyed because they worshiped idols. But the problem was, the reason the southern kingdom and the northern kingdom of Israel were destroyed because they allowed that kind of thing to come in and influence their worship. They spake and said to the king Nebuchadnezzar, O king, live forever. Thou, O king, hast made a decree that every man that shall hear the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, dulcimer, and all kinds of music shall fall down and worship the golden image. And whosoever falleth not down and worshipeth, that he should be cast into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. There are certain Jews who now have set over thee to the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men, O king, have not regarded thee. They serve not thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up. Tattletale. It's like, what difference does it make to you whether they fall down and worship that idol or not? But you know what? They were jealous. They were jealous that the king allowed these Jews to be in power in Babylon. They did not want that. They were, and just like the Pharisees, were always looking for something to accuse Jesus of. I'm sure these folks were looking for something to accuse the Jews to put into power. Then Nebuchadnezzar, in his rage and fury, commanded to bring Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Then they brought these men before the king. Nebuchadnezzar spake and said unto them, Is it true, O Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? Do not ye serve my gods, nor worship the golden image which I have set up? Now if ye be ready, that at what time ye hear the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, and dulcimer, and all kinds of music, ye fall down and worship the image. I hope they didn't talk that way, whether they repeated everything. After a while, I say, okay, I got it, just say music. You fall down and worship the image which I have made. Well, but if you worship not, you shall be cast that same hour into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. And who is that God that shall deliver you out of my hands? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said unto the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we are not careful to answer thee this matter. If it be so, our God, whom we serve, is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of thy hand, O king. That's the kind of faith these young men have. And again, these are young men. These aren't old wizards. These are teenagers. But when they were threatened to be thrown in the fiery furnace, what did they say? We believe that our God will work it out somehow. But they said, that's okay. But if not, be it known unto thee, O king, that we will not serve thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up. If we die, if you throw us in that furnace and we are burned up, that's okay. Because we are not going to worship your God. We are only worshiping the one true God. That's the determination and the faith that these young men have. You know, this is the kind of faith we need today in America.
Amen.
This is the kind of faith we need today in our churches. This is the kind of faith that we should each see, that no matter what happens, we trust God.
Yes.
I think about James, and I think about the fact, you know, he didn't just lose a wife. He lost his life.
Yes.
He lost everything that he had. What would you do today if that happened? What would you do? Would you whine and whine? Or would you go to God and say, thank you. Thank you for being good to me. I know I'm going through some things, but it's okay. No. These young men said, if you throw us in that furnace and you burn up, it's okay. But we're not worshiping you gods. But our God told us not to. And we're gonna have faith and trust in you. Amen? I think I'm gonna stop there tonight. And we'll go on from there. I just want to encourage you tonight that, God will never leave you or forsake you. That's his promise. And I think that's a promise that we all have to keep in front of our minds. He made that promise to you. When you came to Jesus Christ and accepted him as Lord and Savior. His promise is, I will never leave you or forsake you. You're going to go through something. See, that's the other problem I got. People think when I come to Christ, I don't have any more problems. And that's where the devil messes people up. That's how the devil causes people to turn away. Because immediately something happens, the devil will be whispering in their ear. I thought you were promised that, it's going to be great in your life. You're a Christian now. You're a follower of Christ. No, nothing should go wrong. But things will happen. But we have to keep faith. Amen?
Amen.
Thank you for coming out tonight. I appreciate it. Be encouraged. Keep reading the Word. Keep studying the Word. Stay in the Word and know that He is true to His Word. And keep praying for James and his family.